This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, concluders, today I'm honored to have Piers Fallowfield-Cooper on the show. He is the author of a book, Are You Still the Future? He's an executive mentor, leadership coach with over 30 years of experience, which is awesome. Anyway, with all that being said, Piers, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, John. Very pleased to be here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got into leadership and coaching.
Oh, that's a better question than I was expecting. But the first one I was kind of expecting was that terrible one, tell us about yourself. We have to do that kind of quick sort on what do they want to know about. Now, as you know, and our listeners will find out, I'm moderately dyslexic. So that has advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage I can't spell. And if I was locked on a desert island and the only way out was to spell immediately, and I only got 3 goes a day, I'd still be on there. You know, it's IMM, IME, IM. Oh, it's just terrible. The pluses are it kind of stimulates the mind and we think differently. Mm-hmm. So I'm a huge fan of context. And I know that your listening group are younger leaders, maybe first time into a leadership position or stepping in or wanting to. Mm-hmm. And I think context is everything. So the first thought I have when you ask me the question is, what does my audience want to hear and what lens would they be looking? I'm sorry, that's a mixed metaphor because hearing and lenses, but what lens would they want to look through? Mm-hmm. And you see, so many of us forget about our audience. So our boss is a different audience for the people who are on the same team as us. So in answering your question, for your audience, I guess they'd be most interested in how did a kind of shy dreamer end up successful and happy, which in itself is a story. And I think it's always been the same kind of things. I've always been very committed to what I did. So really, you always have to ask yourself, are you truly committed to this, whether it's a relationship, whether it's the job you're in, whatever it is you're doing, you know, a team you're playing on or anything like that, are you really committed? Because if you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be there. You know, be committed or leave. Otherwise, it's unhappiness. It never works. So how did I end up here? Well, the last bit of my wonderful journey, which has been coaching and mentoring, I tend to coach and mentor 2 different groups. One is very senior executive, CEO, C-suite of major corporations. And the other group is leaders of tomorrow. And I love working with the leaders of tomorrow, particularly because they do their homework. They do their homework, they bring it straight back, and they ask for more. Unlike the other ones who are always so busy and you have to nag them. So we sold a business that I was running, and the business was a technology business that was a niche competitor to Reuters or Bloomberg. It was real-time information. So anybody who's involved in your listeners of technology or real-time information or anything, the best you can ever be is up all the time. You know, and that is your minimum performance standard. So it's. I always wanted to have a job because before that I was trading financial markets, and I always wanted one of those jobs where you could put a sign up, closed on Thursday morning for staff training. And I've never had one of those. I've always had this kind of very intense things. So we sold the business. We were a niche competitor to Reuters or Bloomberg, selling real time information for traders. And we sold it, and I asked myself the question, I was too young and too poor to retire. Well, not actually, but I couldn't have retired to the kind of life I wanted. And also I need intellectual stimulation. So I asked myself the question, what's next? Which we're all asking all the time, what's next? And my next question, my question was, all right, so what's next? So I asked myself the question, what did I love doing? And there were a few things I loved doing. One was I liked being captain of the ship, full speed ahead. We can do this. We can achieve, which was lovely. I also loved working with my cleverest clients, the BPs, the Citibanks, the Morgan Stanleys, and working out how to answer the questions they had with the data. And the other thing I loved doing was growing my top team, being like the internal coach, the internal mentor. Mm-hmm. And each of them had a nice energy to them, but there were different energies. So working with my cleverest clients was very cerebral. That was, brain power. Captain of ship was, that was energy and to a degree ego. But the thing that filled my heart was working with my top team and helping them grow. So I thought, you know what? I want to do something like that. So I wrote a one-page piece of paper in my new career, and I wrote down everything, and I waited for the phone to ring. And fortunately, it did. Somebody who'd worked for me was now running a tech business and said, look, I've got a dysfunctional sales team, Piers. Could you sort them out for me? Oh, I know how to do that. So I went and did that. And then that was my very first piece of work. And then from there, it grew. And so now I do about 80% of my work one-on-one and 20% with teams. And when I'm working with people, I'm always looking for their particular spark, what they're good at, what energizes them. Because it's like pushing on an open door. So then you try and find that, and from there, you begin the work. So I'm incredibly happy, very content, being paid very well for something I would happily do for free, which I believe is the ultimate goal.
Don't tell your clients that.
Well, I do sometimes, because if you have relationship. So a few years ago, 10 years ago now, maybe 12 years, I did a master's degree in coaching and organizational consulting. I thought I've been doing this for a while. Perhaps I should go and get trained in it. And I wanted to, I didn't do a degree after high school. They wouldn't let me in. I'm not smart enough, not bright enough. Well, it was a different reason. I like to play on that and work it for the sympathy vote. But for the sympathy vote. Mm-hmm.
So you didn't get in.
So
after high school.
So I decided to do a mature degree, mm-hmm. and organizational consulting, and most of it I knew. 80% of it I knew. 20% I didn't and was new, and of that 20%, most of it didn't matter. But every now and again there were gems, mm-hmm. absolute gems. And one of the gems was about what makes a successful coaching relationship. And it was mostly the research had been done from the world of counseling, but the rules moved straight across. And we were all thinking, it was the quality of our questions, the wonderful coaches we work with. No. There was three things. It was one, and this was particularly important from the therapeutic side, does the person have somebody to support them when they leave this place? So if, say, for example, you were in doing some therapeutic work, which I don't know, but therapeutic work, and you were working with maybe somebody who had an alcohol issue or something like that, well, unless there's somebody to help them stay away from it, it makes the journey more difficult. That was one. Number two was the willingness of the client to engage. And three was the quality of the relationship that was built. So this is something that we all should be thinking about all along. If you have relationship, if you have real relationship, then you can say and do anything. Mm-hmm. Profound learning for me.
Yeah, I think that's as I grow in my leadership journey myself, I realize that how important building that I don't want to call it social. I guess it is social capital that you would build by having good relationships with your peers and those around you. It matters so much more than, just your intellectual savviness, I believe, because I found that some other leaders that I've been, kind of working with and talking to, they had this mindset that they learned on at a, yeah, I don't know why, early in their career, that they should, kind of be heavy hitting, and kind of stand up for themselves and just be, if someone, disagrees with you, you need to just like fight back. You're really hard. And I'm like, no, I think you should listen and try to learn and build those relationships early on, so that when there is something important that you need to stand up on, you have that, um, you've built up this relationship to where they'll trust you when you push back, that it matters. And you're pushing back only on things that matter, not just because someone, didn't see it your way at the beginning.
Cool. So 3 things I just go bing, bing, bing in my mind. One, the great Stephen Covey, 7 Habits, talks about the emotional bank account.
Yes.
You must have credit in the emotional bank account. So if you have credit in the emotional bank account, then you can afford to take withdrawals. If you've got nothing in there, you're overdrawn, and that's usually where issues begin. The other thing is, every leader, every manager, everybody in any position has to ask themselves the question, is this a skirmish or is this a battle? So skirmishes, be prepared to lose them. Battles you have to fight for. But you have to be able to scan it and work out which it is. Lose all the skirmishes. Lose them all. Don't use your energy. Battles you have to die for. And the third thing is there's a law called the law of requisite variety. And the law of requisite variety says that the species, animal, plant, person, part of a system that is the most flexible will take over the system. So, for example, I don't know, do you have a garden?
I do. I have, I actually just recently, within the last year or so, I've gotten into hydroponics and, trying to grow my own lettuce and tomatoes and peppers. It's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Have you ever tried to grow roses?
I have not. No.
Good plan. So
I try to grow things I can eat.
Yeah. So roses are picky. Roses like to face a particular way. They don't want too much water. They don't want, too much sun, and then they get green fly and black fly. Your entire life is tending these roses. And we have a plant in the UK called the buddleia, and the buddleia will grow anywhere. It particularly loves railroad tracks. So give it 3 grains of soil on the side of a railway bridge, and up it'll come. If you chop it down, it comes back stronger. So which one is going to take over the world? Our friend the buddleia, because it's the most flexible. It just adapts. And of course, Darwin is basically misquoted because they always speak about survival of the fittest. But the fittest for Darwin was not the strongest, it was the most adaptable. You see, it's adaptability. Yeah. So I was in New Zealand a few years ago, and there was in the middle of Lake Wanaka. So when the settlers came to New Zealand, they also brought things that they shouldn't have brought, like stoats and weasels, and which have no natural predators there, so they're a problem. So every now and again, they surround somewhere and make it a nature reserve, and then get rid of them. So the things. So we got this beautiful nature reserve, and this strange plant that sticks out up to about a yard, about 3 foot. Very spiky. You can't even get near it. And then from that height above, it's a normal bush. Excuse me, what's going on here? Well, a particular predator they had could only reach about 2.5 feet. So through nature, this plant evolved to have spiky bits so that the creature couldn't grab it and chew it and eat it. Then after that, it could just become its normal tree. It's quite amazing.
Yeah. I love to hear stories about that. So you can see how things have adapted to their surroundings. And like you said, I never really thought about it when it comes to leadership, but how adaptability is what survives. That's what, comes next. So,
There's two things. If you're a younger leader, you need to be adaptable and you need to be adoptable. You've got to find someone who adopts you.
Like a mentor?
Like a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who is a champion for you. Mm-hmm. And if you're very lucky, several people will adopt you. But they will adopt you because you're doing the right thing. You're engaged, you're committed, you're stepping up. We all should be leaders, even if we're not in a formal leadership position. You don't need a title on your business card. You don't need a plaque on the desk. You just naturally need to step up and step up in your own way. You can be a quiet leader. Leaders don't, this caricature of this leader in a cape. Not all heroes wear capes. An early title of the book, actually, it ended up as being called "Are You Still the Future?" But an early title of the book was "If the Cape Fits, Wear It." But anybody who's written a book knows that you go through multiple titles and multiple feelings about the book.
So, real quick, tell me a little bit about why you landed on that title then. Are You Still the Future?
My shock title was going to be You Were the Future Once, but which I thought, that would certainly, grab some attention. But I thought my audience was quite small and they might be a bit scared by it. So I had this idea about reinvention. So there was a fabulous, what do you call him, pop star, rock star, singer called David Bowie.
Yeah.
And I met David Bowie years and years and years ago. And the thing that was so surprising about David was that he would reinvent himself before he needed to. So he killed Ziggy Stardust long before Ziggy Stardust needed killing. He could have had years more out of that. But he was a constant, refreshing, re-energizing. So that the whole purpose of the book was to explore this idea of journey. This is leadership journey. But to explore this idea of change and reinvention. We should always... But one of the challenges is... I'm sorry to jump sliding. One of the challenges is that people will have a passport photograph of you as a younger leader, as a stepping up leader. They'll have a kind of passport photograph of you. And it's very difficult, unless you obviously change, obviously adapt, obviously are different, to recognize that you aren't the kid who was making the coffees or running the errands, So it's quite difficult sometimes to show you've changed. But reinvention is incredibly important. You've got to reinvent all the time. But you've got to update, like any technologist would. You have to update your systems for new information that comes in, for new situations come in, new circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's absolutely right. And I love the fact that, do you think people wait too late to update themselves, or do they typically, do it?
Yep. So, have you ever been to a supermarket hungry?
Yeah, that's always a bad time to go, but yes.
Fatal. Hungry shopper never buys wisely.
Right.
So if you are trying to update quickly and hurriedly because the situation had changed around you and you didn't read the signals in the system about what was going on, that's not a good place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So you want to be ahead of it. My dad was an engineer, so he was a planner. So his was very structured about what I need to do next so that I can do that. Anybody who's been in project management probably is good at this because they know that, if ever you've done construction project, you know that you have to order the stuff for the bathroom first, because otherwise you'll have all the tradespeople on site and no bathroom stuff. So you got to get ahead of this, yeah.
Mhm.
And you've got to ask yourself the question: what skills or talent? So first question: what skills and talents do I have that I'm really good at and energize me? Is there anything that there's a gap, and how could I fill that gap in? So that gap might be about volunteering for a different project. It might be volunteering to be on a team. It might be asking someone for, look, I don't understand this. Could you explain? It might be doing an evening class. You've got to do this. You've got to invest in yourself.
One of the things that I struggle with is, I guess I want to call it ego. Maybe it's that having that, you know, you mentioned finding your shortcomings and seeing where that gap is and how you can fill that gap. It's hard for me to sometimes see that for myself. And going back to your adoptability thing you were talking about, for me, it takes like a mentor or someone to kind of be brutally honest with me and tell me the things that I struggle with and the things that I'm doing bad at to help me see it for myself. How 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 can I try to learn to do that on my own?
Mm. So, by the way, if a coach ever says to you or a client ever says to you, that's a good question, it means they don't know the answer. So that's a good question, John. So I'm a...
Or should I even try? Like, or is it something that I should always have that help?
No, this is really important where I was going to go.
Mhm.
So I fundamentally believe that you should work with what's working and do more and more and more of it. Okay? So then you might find, okay, now there's a gap between where I am and what I want, because this is what I'm good at, this is what energizes me, but this is what they want. Yep. So then that can be a tough call. You might have to make a decision on that. So the great philosopher Wittgenstein said, there's only two ways to have a happy life. Either find a world in which... He didn't say these actual words, you understand, because he actually wrote it in Latin. But you either find a world in which you fit, or create a world to suit you. Anything else is unhappiness. Right? So what your real question should be is, so whenever I'm working with a leader, the first question I ask is, are there any fatal flaws with this leader that need to be dealt with? Right? So if, for example, the leader interrupts everybody, or if the leader perpetually makes promises that he'll do this, and never delivers, this is a fatal flaw. It's just going to trip them up again and again. So you deal with the fatal flaw. Then once you've dealt with the fatal flaw, start working on what energizes you, what you love doing, what doesn't really feel like work, And then the leader might say, oh, well, I love going out and meeting clients. I like doing this and this and this. Then there's a second question, and you say, okay, do you get a chance to do that a lot? Oh, all the time. Then there's a third question. Okay, so who's doing all the other stuff when you're off doing that? So often you can find, particularly when you're creating a team, you'll find somebody who's brilliant at one set of things, but not at the other, and vice versa. So create a team, working with their strengths. So if I was working with you, I'd be asking you what you love doing, what really energizes you. Yeah. And you would tell, give me a couple of things. What really?
For me, I think it's kind of like what you said at the beginning, where you talked about growing that um, early on leader, that new leader. I like to find someone that's just finding their footing in a certain area, and feed into them and mentor them and help them get better at those things. So back in my early career, I was a software developer. I wrote code. I did things like that, IT engineering, and I liked building things that I could see the outcomes of it. And when I first became a manager and kind of learned how
learned what not to do first, and then learned what to do. And I started seeing results of people that were on my team grow and become better and better. That was more meaningful to me than writing good software, So I really enjoyed to see the people that reported to me excel, whether it was at my company or somewhere else. Like I loved it when, one of my employees went from being a call center rep to being a software developer on my team to being a project manager for a different company. I love seeing that growth in them.
So this nurturing sounds like a hydroponics. Nurturing.
You got the right word.
There you go. No, it comes across from you. You've got a lot of personal warmth, and it comes across. I can see that. So, just out of curiosity, what did you think that might be missing a bit?
So for me, I think that there's a lot of things that I have to really, work on. Communication is that's the whole reason. One of the reasons why I started a podcast was to practice communicating and get better at it. Because although I feel like I have really good intentions, sometimes my words may come off harsh, especially when I'm trying to improve someone, and try to tell them where, like, I see this is a mistake you're making. And, I've learned over time that I need to just ask questions and let them find their own mistakes versus just pointing them out bluntly, because sometimes that hurts their feelings and then they reject it and it doesn't work very well. But that was, something that I struggle with. And I think empathy is another one. Like just being able to put myself in someone else's shoes is a real struggle for me. It's not natural. Like naturally, I just want to say, hey, stop doing this, do this. This will make you successful. Just do this. But in reality, I need to step back and think, like, what was their day like that led them to making those decisions? Because that's really hard for me I have to actually, really to sit back and take time and try to think it through. I can't just naturally, whereas other people I see, they have a conversation and they just empathize so much. And for me, I'm like,
So, what's your strategy like? Is your strategy good?
I think I have a pretty good strategy. So like before I have a one-on-one with someone, I will spend about 10 to 15 minutes prior to that one-on-one and try to think about what their day was probably like coming into this meeting. Like, for example, if I know one of my managers, they have their team meeting an hour before my meeting. So I go and I'll check, like, what kind of problems is their team having? Well, there's someone that's getting ready to be out on medical leave for a while, so they're probably stressed a little bit about that. They're trying to reassign, projects and assignments to other groups while this person's out. They've got a lot going on. So when they come in here, they probably aren't prepared for this meeting the way that they normally would because they have more on their plate than they usually do. So I try to think it through like that before the meeting. Okay. And every now and then I'll get busy though, and I just won't do it. And those one-on-ones are never as productive as the ones that I actually put time into ahead of time.
So you have a model that works that sometimes you follow?
Sometimes I do, yes. I would like to follow it more, but
You'd like to follow it more. So it's curious because you've got are you an easy boss to work for?
Most of the time, yes.
Okay. So you've got a naughty smile.
Every now and then I'll get cranky.
We run. So our listeners can't see this, but you've got a naughty boy smile, and that naughty boy smile says, "I kind of know what I'm doing, and I do it anyway."
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes,
sometimes I get cranky, and I'll get frustrated with someone when I see they're not living up to the potential that I know that they have. So I'll just push them. I'll try to push their buttons to hopefully make them see that they're not living up to where they want. Like, for example, I had a conversation today and someone was asking me, basically they wanted me to tell them what to do in this situation. And I knew the answer and I could have easily just given it to them. But instead I kept asking them, well, what do you think you should do? Well, why do you see it that way? Help walk me through it. And at the end, they got frustrated and they said, why didn't you just tell me what you would do right here? And I said, because I need you to be able to defend this if someone asks you why. And if you haven't thought through all the questions that I'm asking you, you won't know what to say. You'll just say, oh, because John told me to. Yeah. And I want you to understand it and be able to defend it in a way that you truly believe and understand these concepts. And that and if you're not on board with it, let me see where I'm wrong. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. I want you to figure it out. But I was definitely pushing their buttons today. They're not very happy with me.
And when you were pushing the buttons, were you getting the result you wanted?
Eventually, it just took a little bit of time.
Okay. Because
it wasn't as immediate as I would have liked.
Okay. Because one of the things we really should be thinking about all the time is back to what's working. If it's working, do more of it. If it isn't working, do something different. Einstein's definition of madness, doing the same thing again and again, expecting different results.
Right.
Yeah. So the challenge that I always have to be very careful with is, do we sound like we're interrogating? Yeah. So we think we're being nice, Mr. Gentle, right?
Yeah.
So why is this? Why is that? Sometimes the brain kind of kicks up a defense, and then you try and press harder, and the other person's brain kicks up more and more and more. So sometimes you have to sneak up on it. Just have to sneak up on it in a different way, with a kind of, So I often get asked by clients, what do you think I should do? Now, because I'm both a mentor and a coach, I'm very happy to share, personal experience, advice, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And if you say to a senior exec, well, because, coach always drop down an octave, well, what do you think you should do? That just drives them nuts. So my answer is always the same. Well, I've got a couple of ideas. Can I just check what you've thought of already? Sure. Then then we say, so some way, if you can turn this more conversational, it might be easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Trying to make it more of a two-way conversation versus a
two-way conversation. Well, so what's your first thoughts on this? Yeah, or how far have you got along with your thinking? Because otherwise, it can get very frustrating for the person you're trying to help when they know you have the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that is, please just, tell me the code, and sometimes it's easier just to give in and say, okay, this time I will. But do you understand why I'm doing it? Because what you're actually trying to do is get them to learn the thinking process as much as they...
Exactly it. Yeah, absolutely. I want them, and I try to tell my team this regularly, but I don't think it sinks in, that I want you to be able to operate at the best that you can operate, even if I'm not here. I don't want to be a crutch. I want you to know everything that I know. I want you to be as good, I want you to be able to operate without me, basically. I don't want to, be your crutch, because you have the potential, and I want you to surprise me. I don't want to just regurgitate the things that I want you to do. I want you to do something that I didn't think of, and, be better than me in certain areas. I want you to do those things, because if I'm just telling you how to do everything, then it's just going to be a clone of me. And I don't want that. I want somebody that can surprise me.
So, question, if I may. Is it okay if I'm wrong?
Absolutely.
Do I know that?
Maybe not.
Okay. So one of the challenges we have to, it's a big challenge. One of the things we have to do is we have to let the people who work for us make mistakes.
Yes.
Because all the learning's in the doing. It doesn't matter how much theory, how many classrooms we sit in. The learning is in actually the doing. So we want to put parameters around it. But we have to let people fail without blowing up the building, because that's the only way to learn. And just another thought, often people don't like disappointing their boss. So they may become cautious because they want to get the right answer or want to please you or those kind of things. So if you can send signals and messages around, look, I'm really keen on a learning environment. Yes, we can make mistakes. Yes, we can screw up. As long as let's not blow the place up. but we can make mistakes. But then they have to believe it. Yep. They have to believe it. So when one of them does make a mistake, you have to be very gentle. Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, that's a tough one to do. I'm gonna have to work on that one for sure.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
But Pierce, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because again, the personal warmth is coming out. We're very best as our leaders show our humanity. You know, where we show our flaws, our vulnerability. See, vulnerability is really interesting. We always talk that we want a trusting environment. And trust is, the foundation of most kind of building a team, building a group, building relationships. But the reason we want the trust is so that people can feel open and vulnerable and willing to share.
Right.
The challenge is, in order to have trust, you have to have vulnerability first. So some fool has to go first to kind of kickstart the reaction. So when the leader is willing to be open and vulnerable and show their humanity, show their flaws, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, again, it's just one of those things you have to work on as a leader, because you have to realize that you're never done. You're always working. And Pierce, I really appreciate you coming on the show and offering this advice and helping me out, because I think that's
you end up in a funny chat, which was good.
Yeah.
I hope the people listening get some value out of it.
I'm sure they will. What I was going to say is, I'm sure it's helping them out too, because they get to see my struggles and hopefully learn from them, without making some of the same mistakes. But anyway, how can people connect with you online, learn more about what you're doing, and pick up a copy of your book?
That's very nice. So that's really good. Thank you very much. Book is instantly available, delivered overnight on Amazon, called Are You Still the Future? Obviously, if you go into a Barnes & Noble or somewhere like that, you can order it, but instantly overnight with Amazon. I'm on LinkedIn and happy to connect with anybody. And if you type my name up comes both my website and also the book website. And on the book website, I've also write some articles which are quite good. One, for example, why goal setting doesn't work. That's a good provocative one for you to have a look at. So there's a few articles on there. And there's a contact form. Anybody who wants to chat or got a question, just send it in. Happy to.
Awesome. And I'll link those in the show notes too at geekleader.com, so people can go there and click through. And again, Pierce, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the live mentorship that we just did.
John, absolute pleasure. And thank you for inviting me on.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.